Lee was really uncomfortable and he said, we need to tell him. I just said, listen, my cameraman's been with me for 18 years. He doesn't know. None of these people know. I cannot make that exception. Let it go.
Welcome to Locarno Meets, a movie podcast brought to you by UBS from the Locarno Film Festival. Tarsem is a visionary director of music videos, commercials and movies. He joined us to talk about his 2006 masterpiece, The Fall, which, until now, had been almost impossible to see for almost a decade. Tarsem, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure being here.
We're in Locarno to celebrate the 4K restoration and re-release of The Fall, and it's about time. I first saw this film maybe 2007, 2008, and a friend of mine had it on DVD. I since lost touch with a friend and basically haven't been able to really watch a good quality version of it since. Why? Where's it been?
Well, first of all, it took about 28 years that I had the film, that I was planning it. It took 19 years of location scouting. It took 9 years of trying to find the child. And then we ended up shooting it in 24 countries. And I shot it all over. And then I just thought that was it. We made the film, released the film, and nobody wanted to buy it for free or for anything. It is a very polarizing thing. So people who loved it, and people who hated it, and all those are okay for me. It's just people who think it's komsi komsa, that's my terror. So I just don't mind shit and gold. It's just in between that really terrifies me. So that's what happened when we took it out then. Then nobody wanted it. I worked for another 2 years to release it myself so that some form of it would exist. And then suddenly it got this big cult following, and it took years and years and years. And last year when I went to Toronto, there was somebody basically saying, like, why can't we see this? We are watching it on, bad Russian and, like Chinese pirated copies and everything. And I just said, like, you know what? I'll put all my effort into it after this. So the moment after the JSC, I went and unfortunately I found FA, and then really love your creative choice from Locarno, the creative director. He just said, Marcello introduced me to him. He just said, like, we love the film and we wanted to be here. So FA asked me if there was a 4K version, and I just said, like, there will be, and there was one. Because when we made the movie, I was so fond of it existing in the future that this film, and the only other film at that time that was finished in 4K was a small film called Iron Man.
Oh, that little indie one, yeah.
So that's the only two films, but I could not find the material. So it took forever, and then we found an old unfinished one, and we worked on that, restored it, got a lot of the stuff out of the negative, finished that, and now here we see it today.
What a incredibly long labor of love. Is it true that Criterion turned it down?
Well, we never got in touch with them correctly. They just would not respond. It's just I've never known quite how to even, that's why we never knew about how to market this film, and nobody kind of knew what to do with it, unless if it wasn't for college professors and film students and cameramen and those kind of people who put it out there, it would have just never showed up again. It's just that it went there, and then suddenly it found a critical mass that I always knew existed. It just got more eyeballs on it, and that's what made it come alive.
And now it's found kind of perfect home with MUBI.
It does. MUBI is perfect for it. And I just think and also Locarno screening, I'm really looking forward to it. And hopefully these film students won't fall asleep before 11:30 and come and see the movie.
No, they're young. They've got energy. They'll be up all night.
That the two are not mutually exclusive, but let's hope they stay awake.
I always thought there's a certain irony to this film being so difficult to see, because so much of the theme of it to me seems about how once a storyteller tells a story, it belongs to the audience as much as it does the storyteller.
Mm-hmm. It was actually, I would say, more different, because I would say when you're telling a story, before cinema came along, the audience was as much the author of the film as the person telling it. Right now, that works through economics. You do a particular film, and the studio will test it and say, oh, people don't like this part, take this out. Then the audience tells you what they want to see. But if you go before cinema came along, or before even literature stuff, you're telling a story to a crowd, or if a musician is playing to 3 people or 10,000 people, you use their body language to tell them where the story needs to go. That's what the film was about. So when you're telling it to that, every time you tell a story, it will be different. Like, when you're pitching it to a studio, if the guy is kind of like taking messages on his text, you introduce, include this crazy woman that takes an Uzi and walks in and kills everybody in a Burger King. You pick up the pace, and if he's sitting forward and listening, you can take your time pacing it out. So if I want to tell a story about that, so if you're telling that to a child is so transparent, you can tell what they want and what they don't. So you might have an agenda, but they have an equal powerful trip. Right now, it's money where people won't come to see a film and studios will make you make those changes. But back then, you look at a crowd. If you're in Morocco telling it to a crowd, if you're in a small classroom telling a story to people, their attention span will tell you what pace to move in. So they're as much auteurs of the story as you are. But in cinema, you make a movie, it's made out there, and now basically you come to terms with it. It isn't like, you can't change it. So that's what it used to be before. So I want to tell a story like that. So that's what I think it was about, that if you're telling a story and using that person's body language, because they have the upper hand, they are as much part of your story.
So you shot all the scenes in the hospital quite early on in the filmmaking process, right? And am I right in thinking that the young girl who's in it, in a way, contributed to the story arc?
Well, completely, because for me, the reason it could never get made, even though Fincher tried a lot to get this financed, to introduce me to all the people, the problem is I would go and tell them, they say, where's the script? I said, it doesn't exist. This is the box that the girl stole things from, and I'll tell you stories from it, which is what she's going to hear. And then it was never going to get financed. Where are you going to shoot it? Well, I have about 29 countries. Do you have insurance? No. So it was never going to get financed. So we kind of put it together just thinking, okay, that's it. So I knew roughly where the stories are going. So I told you it took 9 years to find the child. I was okay with it, boy, girl, anything. So the moment I saw her, I just said, I told my brother, okay, we've been looking for that long. 28 years we've had the story. This girl is a different girl 4 months from now. So we need to make the movie right now. Sell everything, don't sell the house. And then we'll come back and see what happens. So 4 years later, I told him the movie's almost done. He said, the house is up for sale. I said, the movie's done. So that's how I finished it. So for me, when we went with her, I saw the hospital sequence first to see what part was believer and how malleable and ductile she was to move it forward. So Lee Pace was in charge of that pacing to see that if she maneuvers, take it in that direction, he was unheralded hero, because when you're working, like I say, with a child or an animal, everybody will forget that the actor is good. They'll just go for the child. So for me, she basically knew roughly where it was going, but was given a lot more leeway on where it goes.
I really, and I mean this honestly, I think that it's the single best child performance I've ever seen, and it doesn't feel like a performance. I have a son about that age, and I just remember him when I look at it.
That's exactly correct, and it's a great compliment to get. But for me, I saw one time a performance in one film work, and that's the only thing that I told Lee Pace. I said, this is the only time I've seen a child performance that I buy, and it's a movie called Poneth. And the first time I saw it, I said, because if you kind of want children to be children, you shoot telephoto and you come in there and you can make, this magazine act. If you iterate it, suddenly it'll be funny. This thing could win an Oscar if you're going to move it around with that. But if you're going to leave it, yes. If you just basically lock the camera, it separates the child from men. And when you saw Poneth, there was the plot moved forward. The girl was 4.5. And I was just thinking, what are they doing? And I never really understood it. Then I took that as how I was going to take it. So I just realized when they're in a bed, they're going to sit up. I'm going to make holes in it. They're going to get wired. I'll figure out my lighting. And they can just interact with a rough idea on where it needs to go. And then I will work out the fantasy. And when I assembled that, I just thought, if I release just that, it'll win all sorts of awards. It'll do absolutely fine because there was an incredible all-heart story.
Yeah.
But I had been location scouting and my girlfriend had just dumped me and I just said, I'm going on this magical mystery tour.
And you need to put Darwin in a big, colourful coat.
Yes, in a pimp suit.
Yeah.
So I just said, I'm going to put pimp coats. So I said, I had to put that in. And I just said, let's make it. And then later on, I think if in another 15, 20 years, if I did another cut, I will release that. Just take out the fantasy of it. So I had to make it. So for me, she knew roughly where it was going and she's aware and she had a lot of leeway to move the stories. The first day she comes filming, her first 2 teeth are missing. If you're shooting a studio film, you're already screwed. You're thinking CGI teeth or put them back in. And I just said, no, it's fine. So we wrote it into the script that the mystic's power is in his teeth. And then later on when the explosion goes, the mystic's teeth come out and he loses the hair. It's like a guy with cancer as opposed to the superhero. So I kind of worked all that into it. So when she's telling him to steal morphine, the reason she was older than the girl in Poneth, which I loved, was because I saw her after 9 years when I saw that child. I said, this child, but she said she's 6.5. I said, how? Why is she not understanding the thing clearly? She said she doesn't speak English. And I went, oh, wow, that bought me another 1.5 years. Because then she was thinking, maybe I'm not understanding what he's saying because the language barrier.
Yeah.
Then I took that in. The problem was, after about 2.5 weeks of shooting, her English got better and she started speaking with an Indian accent. Then I stopped for 3-4 days and got a whole bunch of Romanians, and I would explain to them and they would talk to her, so that the misunderstanding was fine, is what I wanted. And then because she stopped rolling her eyes and stopped talking like an Indian, then she went back to the person she was. So Poneth was the only time I'd seen it. When I saw it in this film, when we did this particular one, I put that in, and the really heavyweight lifting is Lee Pace, because he has to make sure it goes in the right way. So when he's showing her that paper, and she just went like, oh, he wants more MORPHINE, she's probably dyslexic. She said IN3 because she thought 3 was reversed into E.
Yeah.
And I just said, no, it's great. Just leave it as that. So the next day when she goes to steal the pills, I said, she was supposed to bring less pills. I said, no, fill it up. She gets a full box, but she thinks he needs 3. So she dumps all the others, and now he knows he can't OD on 3 pills. So it makes it even more frustrating.
That's
so
amazing.
All those things were just things that she would make and be natural, and I would just make it ahead. And also, just to create an environment and not for what you'd call, to be a method actor, I wanted the guy who nobody knew. So when we got Lee Pace, he had come out film school, I wanted him, but he had just done a movie. But that movie, he had played a woman. So I just said, nobody will recognize him. So we created a fake ID, and we just said, this is the hero of the film. So we changed the script that the hero in the movie, in the fantasy, is not him, but is her father. So the father played the hero all throughout. That's what everybody thought. So we told everybody that Lee Pace cannot walk.
I know, this is insane. So for what? How long? So
3.5 months.
So, but it was the crew as well, right? The crew didn't think he could walk.
Nobody, the cameraman did not know. And I'd worked with the cameraman for 18 years.
What happened if Lee Pace needed to go to the toilet?
It was such a long process. They had to bring this wheelchair in, and it was really depressing for him because we were staying in these great places and doing everything, but he was alone in a place, had to come in a wheelchair, took a long process to get him in, and it was not so much for it probably helped his method acting of it, but he wasn't interested in it, neither was I. I was interested in, because when you're doing a film like that, where somebody's playing handicapped or anything, no matter what happens when time goes on, people will start bringing booms in, stand on top of this to do the light when they know you're acting like a guy whose legs are broken. When they know your legs are gone, you kind of have to be careful around the guy. And I just said I wanted nobody to move like that around him because it'll affect her. So when she comes in, I just wanted her to think that, but then I had to tell everybody that. There was a negative side to it, because when we did it, of course, I didn't realize that children are really scared of handicaps. So when we shot the movie, I shot it all in sequence. The first day she sees him is the first day she met him. Second scene is the second day she saw him. Third day is the third day. So I did it in sequence. The first she came, I didn't realize how scared children of handicaps. She just didn't want to go near him. So I played that she'd be outside and he's trying to coax her in, and the next she gets vocal, and by the 4th day she was so in love with him. She was the only one climbing on him, and everybody else, thinking he's a handicap, stayed away. The only tough point that I had was I didn't know when this movie was going to finish, because I had it for 26 years and we were 29 years, and we were basically shooting in sequence, and I just said we will have the wrap party before the movie starts because my money might finish before the movie. In the end, so we did the wrap party. And in the wrap party, when he was in a wheelchair, I could see Lee really uncomfortable because a guy came up to him on the wheelchair and was speaking to him. And I went over, and it was the focus puller's, dad. And the guy said, I love this director because he's got such balls to cast a handicap as a handicap. And Lee was really uncomfortable. And he said, we need to tell him. I just said, listen, my cameraman's been with me for 18 years. He doesn't know, none of these people know. I cannot make that exception, let it go. So on the day when I told everybody Lee can walk, people were laughing, some were crying. He was really angry, the focus puller.
I'm sure.
I went up to him to apologize. I could understand he's not going to forgive me, and he didn't. But only she wasn't surprised, because every day was so shockingly weird for her. So when we told her Lee can walk, she was like, oh, okay, that's great. So that was it. So we did it for her, but I just did it for everybody to hold that atmosphere.
Well, I mean, it works, and Lee Pace deserves a medal.
Because if you look at it, there's more tougher things. I think there might be a note when you're making the movie, because he is not only acting, he has to maneuver the conversation. He also lights her. Because if the cameras are there, he's aware of that. I said, if she goes in here, you have to, so he'll listen to her. Then you'll see that he'll move and kind of has to do it naturally because he's handicapped. Make sure she's lit still. and then talk to her. When she would do, he's lighting her, he's talking to her, he's just this little box. And after some time, she would just forget. Like if none of these people were here, you'll forget that they can hear every pin drop in the other room. That's what we were doing. We had these sheets and we had it closed and we had holes through the cameras. So she would just love him and want to touch him and just everything, because she didn't have a father in that particular time. So you could tell she just wanted this man in her life. So it just was wonderful and natural. And we stuck to it.
I mean, it's a very interesting film because you have this incredibly moving, familial type situation at the heart of it. But then, of course, the dynamic, enormous, 24-country, insane, never seen before type of Fantasyland. And I think that there's something... What I think is particularly powerful about this film is that, it's been called an adult fairy tale, but...
I would like it to be called that, but I don't think people call it that, because then you'll embrace it for what it is. Because a lot of people don't like, they'll go like, but this kind of looks like it's so naive with this thing. Like, have you tried talking to a 5-year-old? The 5-year-old has an agenda. You have to hold their attention span. They will move it where they want.
But also, this takes fairy tales as seriously as children take them. Yes. If you watch films about fairy tales, often they put jokes in so the adults feel comfortable. Yeah. But this doesn't do that. It takes it as deathly serious as a 6-year-old would take it.
But see, the thing is, anything to work financially, it has to be able to put ideally in a genre box for distributors. So nobody knew where to put this. Over time, the right audience has told you what to do with it. Because when we made it in America, I wanted it for everybody. They said 18 plus. They gave it R, because they just said the guy's trying to commit suicide. And also, any kind of visual thing in North America never works, because if you go to Disney, they're okay if you kill 2 million people, as long as it's a bomb and you show it from top, and 2 million people die, and it's Disney and it's wonderful and funny. But you go to the ground and you show how a child died, and it'll become, like R-rated plus. So in my particular one, this was one graphic killing, which is through the heart when he stabs himself. They said, take that out. I said, movie doesn't get touched. So I said, okay, R. So I lost a lot of audience there. When I got it to Europe, the Germans looked at it. They just said, we don't know what this is. So you know what? This is a film for children below 12. So they put it in the German festival. And I just went like, what? This is not for people below 12. It has to kind of be a family thing. So if the child is confused, you can explain them what it is. But an adult's fairy tale is not a genre that people will pay to see. And in fact, a movie, I love the director. He did Gomorrah. He did Tale of Tales, which I really enjoyed. That barely got out because it's an adult fairy tale.
Well, actually, a film that it reminded me of is one of your exec producers, Spike Jonze's Where the Wild Things Are. Yeah. It's about like being inside a child's id,
Yes, but the fun thing when we took out, and when I thought the movie was finished and we took it out, nobody wanted it even for free. So after spending all my money, almost selling the house and going back, we put it in the festival, and then nobody wanted it even for free. Then I worked for another 2 years to put it out so that at least it's not like a book where somebody will find in a library later. It needed to be seen.
Yeah.
So I worked for another 2 years. Then we put it out, and then I talked to, they're very good friends of mine that I talked to, Spike and Fincher, and they said, if you put their names in, so they just said, whatever it takes. So they gave it to me for free to say presented by Spike Jonze and Fincher.
It's the brotherhood of the music video directors.
Well, kind of. And also it's basically they get free curry every time I'm there. My brother's wife cooks for them, and then we get food over, and it's a guarantee that from it's not you're not going to get the shits like you do if you get to from a bad place. So she cooks lovely Indian food for them, and they love it. So we've always been together, and we always go there, and I used to make it a mandate that they'd come with a film and show me a film that I had not seen, and we used to do that before. Then our lives got busier and busier, and now it's just we sit down and eat curry and bitch about studios.
Sounds good. I wanted to ask you about the shots, right? Take something like the stony-faced priest, obviously. Maybe the greatest.
That's the only one that there is no reference of. If you ask me where I stole anything for, like they always say, originality is the art of concealing your source. I can show you where I got it from. You say, yeah, I can see that. But that's like blaming Picasso for making naive art and saying, hey, the Africans made masks like that forever. Yes, sure. But you didn't have it in the Western art. So just to take it from there, and a guy who can illustrate that well makes that there is a point of view he's trying to get across. So it works. So for me, all the others have a reference. That particular stuff, the visual stuff for me, all I can say is it's kind of in my DNA on where I grew up. I grew up in a boarding school in the Himalayas. My father was an engineer in Iran. So I was all the time watching 3 months out of the year when the school was snowed in. We'd go to Iran and we'd watch TV. and all the TV was dubbed into a language I did not understand. So I always watched just visual films. So if I watched something, I misunderstood most of them. I never understood that, Get Smart is a comedy or any of that, because they used to take the laugh track out. And to an Indian, a guy, like when he gets into trouble, talking through his, shoe in the thing, like, it's not over the top at all. It just worked perfectly fine. So I'd go back to school and I'd tell those stories to my friends, and they were like, oh my God, you're seeing these incredible. And then later on when they grew up, they're like, your stories were bullshit. That's not at all what that. I said, I didn't know. So for me, my answer was always visual, which is why critics really attack this a lot, because they think the correct way to do is the donkey ahead of the cart. You use the story and then you make your images. I had these images and I said, you got this kid. And I showed the kid and said, where do you want to go? And she would come up with a rough tale. And that's how the story was made. That's not how you make films, is how I was told. And I just said, well, that's how this film's going to be made.
So when did you realize that you wanted to work with Aiko Ishioka? Because that seems so central.
It was. When we were in school, we used to, because that time you didn't have access to her work, because even in VHS we couldn't see anything. She was directing commercials in Japan. We saw and heard of her work, and I went, this person is incredible. Me and who was the other guy who wrote The Fall with me, Nico.
Her work in Mishima is incredible.
We saw that and loved her, and we adored her. So when we were doing The Cell, they asked me, who do you want for clothes? I said, Eiko Ishioka. They said, oh, somebody like Eiko. I said, no, Eiko Ishioka. Somebody like Eiko Ishioka. I would not back off. Then they introduced us, and it was love at first sight. I loved Eiko. So when we were doing the film, somebody said, my girlfriend, actually, she's coming today, my ex-girlfriend, and she said, you know what? They're going out together. I said, you're a crazy woman. She's like, 30 plus years older than her. You're full shit. Get lost. And when the whole thing finished, they came and said, like, we're in love. And it was the most magical thing for me. So I had first floor access. So anytime me and Nico would plan something, she was always around. She would make something, we'd throw it on the floor, we'd look at the drawings. And the thing about Eiko is that something that, the church or even, advertising people have known forever, church is advertising, is that they look at something, they go like, get the guy who's the most cutting edge, no matter how much you disagree with, and then rein him in. Get somebody who thinks outside the box, and you get
Michelangelo.
Michelangelo to paint the ceiling, and then you tell him like, fuck, you really have to have their penises
Just
out.
tone it down a little.
No, put the leaves on there, and then you fight with him. That's better than getting somebody who doesn't know how to think outside the box and say, go to town. It doesn't work. So with Eiko, the reason you can't ask her to think outside the box. She didn't know what the box was. She'd show you stuff and it'd be so out there. And I go like, Eiko, can you make this practical? She's saying, it's his coat. She said, but does he have to walk in the coat? I said, Eiko, yes, please. You have to rein it in just to make it practical. But she was so receptive. The only thing was there was just never did not enough work. You would make one change, she would always make 3 variations. I said, I'm okay, change. Now just give me this little change. She would make 3. So every little thing, she would make so many illustrations and then help you hone it down. There was only one character, which was odious, that I could never figure out how to go until we were on the shoot. And then I changed that character, because the main bad villain was supposed to be, and it is all the original story also, was the guy who's in the bed, who's in the room with him. That was odious. Yeah. And then when we were filming out there, my girlfriend had dumped me, which is the reason I made the movie. Because I just said, like, I want to go on this magical mystery tour. And then Nico, my friend, said, like, you know what? Instead of that guy being the villain, the actor that we wanted wasn't available for the odious part. He said, shouldn't that guy be the villain, the film star? And I went, yes, because then it makes it about there is nothing more painful in the universe than a broken heart. This guy can live with his legs gone. But the broken heart is the last straw that she dumped him and has gone and basically uses it. So that changed. And then it became that. Then I told Eiko, because we were making this really caricatured monster for odious. And then I realized, just make him suave. Make him like, is it Frank? Not Frank. The suave in Blue Velvet, when he said, you're one suave fuck. And he said, make him that guy. And then we just took, in the reality, he's kind of like normally well-dressed guy, and in the fantasy he's just this silk version of it and just more slicked back, and it worked.
It works. He's really hateable.
So all the other people, we kind of knew where to go, but you can't tell Eiko when she would make those cokes, and I'm thinking like, would Darwin wear that? I said, but look at her
Would
inspiration.
Darwin wear that? The answer is no.
No. And the thing of it is, Aiko never understood that. She understood the story, and wherever she got her references was from never another film, never another, like painting. She would go to the museum and just look at bugs and animals.
Wow.
And some macro things and come up with this thing. And I went like, of course, Darwin's looking for a butterfly. She's made his coat like a moth. It completely, so I just said like, okay, I would have never gone there, but you think it's okay, do not question it, let it go. So she had free reign.
The film kind of ends with this very moving montage of kind of stunt performances, Buster Keaton and other people. Did that come from somewhere personal? Do you have a particular fascination with stunt performance?
I wouldn't have even made the storytelling about a filmmaker telling a story. It ended up being that because when we were making it, I just thought, which is also something that critics don't like, I always think of a beginning and an end, and I think, is there a movie in the middle? So for me, those two scenes actually were the first two scenes that came in. I said, first is a stylized version of probably how he got hurt. So I had this Beethoven piece that I did a commercial and again did a trial on. And I said that fucking works because you wouldn't think that would work on that speed. That worked. Then the ending, I just looked at it and said like the thing that I liked about Cinema Paradiso was that he finds those kisses that are going back to back to back to back. And I just said like, oh my God, that's perfect because if I do these stunts, it's a happy ending. If you want a happy ending and you're lovely and naive, which would be great. If you want a dark ending, it's got a dark ending. And if you're skeptical, it's actually what I am. It's what it could be. That you can look at it and just go like, oh, so she basically says she hates arts out cinema, the way I'm thinking. Yeah. She loves Michael Bay. She likes stunts for the sole reason that she thinks he did all the stunts. But the truth is, even if he did the one stunt that she saw, she thinks he's in every one of them. It's not. Keaton did his own stunts. So you did all those particular things. So you can think that, yes, he survived. He got to the hospital. He wasn't handicapped anymore. He gave life another chance. That's optimistic. Then comes the pessimistic, glass half empty one, which was like, you know what? Keaton did all those. So obviously she got that wrong. Did she get the first one wrong? He either committed suicide or stayed a handicap all his life in that thing. And somewhere in between, it could be or it could not. When I thought of that ending, I just said, that's the ending. Beethoven is the bookcases. It does that. The rest of the movie will be composed to that particular one. And then the movie came out in between. So that was kind of, I looked at what I liked about Cinema Paradiso, which was just the kisses. Came up with the stunts and then bottom.
Do you know what Katinka Intari was up to now?
I don't have Instagram, I don't have Facebook, and I don't have Twitter or anything like that. I mean, if it wasn't for chess, and porn, I would have never discovered the internet. And I find there's other things out there, so I have no clue. And then recently, I was just told, and I've been in touch with her.
Oh, good.
I love Katinka. I always call her my Russian tank, and she's going, no, you're Romanian tank. So now she's this big smoking chimney that all the time does. She's here today because the festival had they didn't have the budget. And I just said, I will bring Katinka over and her boyfriend.
Oh, that's great.
So they're over, and then I find out she works for Waterson's, and my AD sends me the information. She has a passion that she competes for professionally. She's this big woman. And she loves pole dancing. So
Great.
She is a pole dancer. So she is here. And if you can, get her in.
You turned her into a stunt woman.
Yes. I love Katinka.